Recovery Elevator episode 594.
For me, when I stop and I get past that initial really rough period, it's like there's this whole new level of energy, creativity, meanness that comes out. I sort of show back up.
Welcome to the Recovery Elevator podcast. My name is Paul Churchill, and this is how we quit. On today's episode, we have Eric. He's 55 years old from Columbus, Ohio, and he took his last drink of alcohol on February 14th, 2008. Damn, great job, Eric. Here's an upcoming lineup of RE events. This August, we're going to be in Bozeman. We've got a couple spots left. And then in March of 2027, we're going to Morocco for alcohol-free travel. And then in October of 2027, we are going to be on the infamous pilgrimage, the Camino de Santiago. And then January 2028, we're going back to Costa Rica for, I think, the 6th time. Go to our events page for more information. I got an update email from Camille. This is last week's interviewee. She now has 70 days away from alcohol. At the time of her interview, she had 17 days from her last drink. Big time, Camille, and thanks for the update. I want to cover some stats from the interviewees on the podcast. We have interviewed 8 Jeffs and 8 Chris's. We've had 7 Sarahs on the podcast, 7 Mikes, and 6 Emilys. And for one-time unique male names, we've had a Buddy, a Butch, a Bubba, a Dusty, a Daz, a Vinny, a Win, a Weston, a Cordell, 3 Santinos, well, Santino 3 times, a Joss, Raj, and an Asaph. On the women's side, with unique names, we've had a Zeta, a Lunita, a Sammy, a Thea, a Sophie, a Kayleen, a Corey with a K, a Penny, a Barella, Tamar, and a Camille. We've had 15 countries represented on the podcast. That would be USA, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, France, Sweden, Switzerland, Denmark, Thailand, Dominican Republic, Mexico, Peru, Spain, and Portugal. And we've had all 50 states represented on this podcast, plus a couple U.S. territories. That would be Guam and Puerto Rico. And I even visited the guy in Guam. His name was Randy, and that was a super fun trip. Top 5 states, we've had 58 interviewees from California, 35 from Colorado, 24 from Texas, 23 from Montana, and 21 from Minnesota. Now, the median sobriety time on this podcast, it's not the average because we took out kind of the outliers on the bell curve, but the median amount of time away from their last drink on this podcast is around 800 days, around 26 months or 2.2 years. The shortest duration from their last drink, someone was on the podcast with 11 hours and 20 minutes away from their last drink. Wow, super courageous to come on the show. Love it. And the longest, we had somebody with 44 years away from alcohol come on the podcast. How rad is that? And before we get any further, I want to mention this is an ad from BetterHelp. Thankfully, we talk more openly about mental health now, but asking for help can still feel hard. And BetterHelp's latest research confirms it. BetterHelp's 2026 State of Stigma report surveyed 2,000 Americans and revealed that 85% of Americans believe getting support is wise, yet 74% say society discourages people from doing so. Yeah, there's also a stigma surrounding alcohol addiction and recovery, but once I started talking about my struggles with alcohol, that's when the healing began. Just as I encourage you to burn the ships and talk about your struggles with alcohol, talking about mental health in general with a therapist is a great idea. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 6 million people globally. Don't let the stigma stand in the way of support. Start therapy with BetterHelp. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/elevator. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/elevator. Okay, let's get started. The most important person in the rooms of recovery And this could be at an AA meeting or a cafe RE chat or any alcohol-free community. So it's not the person with 40 years of sobriety spouting off all the wisdom compiled over the years. No, it's not. And I remember when I first entered the rooms of recovery and when somebody with decades plus of sobriety shared, I was like, yo, Paul, pay attention. This dude knows what's up. Now, that's also not necessarily incorrect either. Somebody with decades plus of sobriety definitely has plenty to share. But the person in the room who shares the most truth is the person who has the least amount of time away from their last drink. And usually this is done without words. And here's what I mean. I remember when I was about 6 months away from alcohol and somebody who was on day one shared. The others in the room, including myself, could sense the frantic or unbalanced energy pulsing around the person sharing. They kept trying to describe how shitty it was to be on the day one cycle over and over and feeling overall helpless. They kept saying, "Oh, it's hard to explain. It's just, you know." And once this person let out a deep breath, and we just sat there in silence for probably 15 seconds. And in those gasps, the breaths, the silence, I was like, oh shit, man, I do not want to go back there. So that share gave me some of the best sober motivation I've ever received. Now, the idea that the newcomer is the most important person in the rooms is not a fringe idea. It's more of a rule. And I say this to the new listener, the newcomer, to empower you. We want to hear from you. The newcomer is also the most important person in the room because a core foundation of recovery, it's about helping others. People want to help, and I encourage you to accept the help. There are, in fact, so many reasons why the newcomer is the most important person in the rooms. And it's such a rad concept of sobriety that I wanted to share with you because usually it's the most senior person or the most senior people that are the most valued. But nope, not in sobriety or recovery. And if you're a new listener to Recovery Elevator, I'm so happy to have you stick around. And before we hear from Eric, let's hear from SoberLink. Have you been drinking? It's a question loved ones hate asking, and one that someone in recovery never wants to hear. For the person who's sober, it diminishes the progress they've made. For the one asking, it casts them as the villain. SoberLink makes that conversation unnecessary. SoberLink isn't something you'll find in a store. It's a professional-grade, portable breathalyzer built specifically for alcohol recovery, designed to support accountability while helping rebuild trust with your support network. 3 tests a day, scheduled around your routine. Facial recognition verifies your identity, tamper sensors prevent cheating, and friends and family get your results automatically within seconds. You've done the hard work. Let SoberLink handle the proof. Visit www.soberlink.com/recovery-elevator to sign up and claim your $100 enrollment bonus. That link is in the show notes as well. Eric, how are you?
I am good, Paul. I'm excited to be here. I really admire the work that you do, and I'm happy to be on your show.
Heck yeah, Eric. I appreciate it. I'm pumped to be here with you as well. Let's get right into this. When was your last drink, Eric?
February 14th, 2008.
Right on. That's 18 years. Listeners, most of the time, our interviewees have under 2 years, under 3 years away from alcohol. But here we go. We got Eric, 18 plus years. And occasionally I like to get somebody on the show who's been doing it for a while. Let us know that A, it's possible, what it's like after the bottle in the long run. Maybe it's all unicorn and rainbows, or there's maybe life challenges and all the above. I'm sure it's a little all that. And also you might recognize the voice, the name. This is Eric from a Big Hitter podcast that's been around for a while, the One You Feed podcast. He also recently had a book. We're going to get to that stuff later. But before we get into you, your story, your projects, what you're doing, what you're up to, give listeners a little background about yourself, Eric. This is where you're calling in from, maybe your age, what does your family life look like, what do you do for a living, and then most importantly, what do you like to do for fun?
Yeah, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I am 55. I have a son who's grown and he's a wildland firefighter. So I don't know where he is right now. He's somewhere in the US fighting a fire. And I have a partner. I've been with her for about 10 years. What I like to do for fun is one of the big things is guitar. I play guitar for enjoyment. That's a really big one. I love just walking, hiking, doing that with friends, and I love to read a lot.
I see two guitars leaning up against the wall or in
Yes,
stands
sir.
behind you. What kind of music do you like to play?
I guess it'd be kind of rock, folk, singer songwriter type stuff. But I like to mess around with some ambient music and I just kind of pick it up and just play these days. I used to be in bands, I used to write songs, and now I just do it to do it. And so whatever I feel like when I pick up the guitar is kind of what I do.
I think music, playing guitar, ukulele, whatever instrument, is the ultimate teacher in terms of presence. For example, you don't pull out a piece of piano music to go play the last note. You start at the beginning
Yep.
and then you're at the next note and the next note. You have to focus on every phrase, every part of the song. And there's a reason, gosh, why I love music so much. I think that's tied with vibration and it pulls us into the present moment. You hear in the chorus, you're not thinking of the last note of the song. It's just
Yep.
everybody loves music, man. What are some of your favorite musical artists?
I've been listening to a new artist lately that I've been semi obsessed with named Hamish Hawk. I believe he's Scottish. I love Ezra Furman. I love the band Against Me. I love the Replacements from back in the 80s. There's a band that does instrumental music called Hermanos Gutierrez that I listen to all the time. It's just amazing sort of background, but even foreground music. So those are a few. I could talk about that for the next 2 hours if you want, but I'll keep it brief.
I got a couple artists that you just said I got to listen to, but I do know Hermanas Gutierrez. They have a song called Sonora. It's like 2 minutes long, a minute
Mhm.
50 long. It's just so beautiful. You're right. It's instrumental, and I just have it playing in the background. Awesome stuff.
You should just listen to the rest of their stuff. Just go to their This is Hermanos Gutierrez playlist. It's just all amazing.
So
It's
good.
just all so good.
Yeah. Well, Eric, let's do what we came here to do. I'm going to turn it over to you with your story. I'll jump in with questions. I'm pumped to hear your story and learn more about you.
I'll give you the relatively quick version. I started drinking as a teenager and I always drank strangely. I was drinking like Scope to get drunk. And then I was like, well, you need to drink Pepto Bismol before you drink the Scope to get drunk. Or I'd go out drinking with friends. I'd wake up in the morning, the vodka bottle would still be there. I'd grab a glass of orange juice, pour the vodka in and drink it. So just odd behavior, but I didn't do it very often. And then I started a tutoring program for disadvantaged kids and I saw what alcohol was doing in their lives, like what their parents were doing to these children. So I just swore it off, not doing it. So I went a couple of years of just being completely straight edge, and at 18 though, my best friend started dating my girlfriend, which I did not like, to put it mildly. And somebody said, do you want to drink at one point? And I was like, I don't care. And I drank and it was like a switch flipped and I was off to the races. And I don't know that I was sober a whole lot after that for really about the next 7 years. Started drinking, pot became part of that. At the end, for me, I was a homeless heroin addict. I weighed 100 pounds. I was jaundiced and yellow from hepatitis C. I was facing 50 years in prison and I got sober. And we can talk about how I did all that. And then the next part of the story that's interesting is I was sober for about 8 years. And then I went back out and I really only drank and smoked a little weed. And I ended up having to get clean again, which tells you about all you need to know about how that experiment went.
Were you
Eight
sober
years
from
ago.
heroin for about 8 years, you said,
Yeah.
right?
Off everything for
Okay,
8 years. I was
everything.
completely abstinent because, along with heroin, I mean, I was just what do we call them, a garbage head, right? I was just taking anything and everything I could to make me feel different.
Eric, back it up a moment. Would you say alcohol would be the gateway drug that led you to heroin?
100%.
Okay.
100%. I mean, I think there's a progression. I don't think if when I was 18, somebody had said, hey, do you want to shoot up heroin? That I would have been like, sure, that's a good idea, right? It was only after just this steady progression into alcoholism, addiction, substance use disorder, call it whatever you want, where just little bit by little bit, I just kind of went further and further. And so when the time came, I was in a band and I would go to band practice and I'm like, these guys are more effed up than I am. Like, what is happening? Well, it turns out they were doing heroin and they said, do you want to try it? And I said, sure. And that was a big turning point. And it's not that heroin made me any sicker inside. It's just that the consequences of it accumulated quickly because of the nature of the drug, the nature of our laws, the cost, all of that.
Gotcha. And before we hit record, Eric, you talked about these things are really just masking deeper symptoms.
Yeah.
Can you think of, your girlfriend dating your friend? That, ouch, that hurts. But what do you think the heroin was covering up or made go away or soften an emotional front?
Well, I think starting with the alcohol, what it did was it softened that. But alcohol just made me feel connected to life. When I was drinking, I was excited about life. And I think I had some degree of depression through all of my younger years. I was a full blown kleptomaniac at age 10. I was always in trouble. I feel like I needed something to make me feel alive. And alcohol did that. The challenge, of course, with any of us who have faced alcoholism or addiction is that over time, we start to feel really ashamed of what we're doing. We start to make decisions that are not good. We start to lose trust in ourselves. So we say, I'm not going to drink. And then we do, and we get right. We lose trust. And so as time went on, I believe that the alcohol, the drugs, finally the heroin, were covering up the pain that I had self created through addiction. So I had the original pain, the original thing that was going on. And then I just kept piling it on as time went on.
Eric, I got to highlight that. We've been doing the RE podcast for a hot minute. I don't think I've heard it phrased that way. It's, we have the pain that we're using alcohol or substances to cover up. And then we eventually have to use alcohol to cover up the pain caused by alcohol, the shame, the losing your trust in yourself. And that losing trust in yourself is such a big one because you're losing yourself.
100%.
I've never heard it phrased that way. Beautifully said. Keep going.
I mean, it's the vicious downward spiral of addiction, which is that you feel something awful. So what do? You use or you drink, right? But then you feel bad because you did that or you behaved poorly because of that. So now you feel worse. Well, what do you do when you feel really bad? You do it again. And it's just this downward spiral on itself where the shame and the guilt, after a while, for me, the fear, all of that is untenable to deal with when I'm sober. And so since I can't handle it, I drink.
Yeah, we've heard the term anxiety. And for me, I could only handle intense anxiety for 4, 5, maybe 6 days. And this is intense anxiety, knowing the alcohol would make it worse, but then I would drink and the next day it'd be a little worse. And that's, cue that downward cycle.
Yep, exactly.
That nosedive is so incredibly hard to pull yourself out of. And imagine pulling yourself out of a nosedive every single day. Thank goodness we're both not in that situation. Okay. You're sober for 8 years from heroin. And then I think you said you started smoking weed and a little bit of alcohol.
A lot of alcohol.
A lot of alcohol. In 2008, I think you said you had to get sober again. And before we started recording, you said, you were just as sick as the first time. Why did you go back out? I think that might have just answered that question to alleviate pain. But what was the difference from the first time and the second time? And how was the healing different?
I don't know that I went out the second time because of pain. It's a little bit of a long story, but some things happened that really made the mechanism that I had gotten sober in 12-step meetings unattractive to me. I mean, essentially, my wife left me for a friend of ours in AA. And this seems to be a pattern in my life now that I'm saying it. And I knew it was ridiculous to be mad at a 12-step program because that's silly. But I did have this resentment. And I think I also had a very fragile sort of spiritual perspective that when I really, I had something really terrible happen. I had a 2.5-year-old son. When that happened, I realized I didn't have anything that I really believed in. So that kind of pushed me away from the recovery mechanism I had. And over time, I just became more and more self-focused. Like I started smoking I had never smoked. I had been a heroin addict. I was adamantly against cigarettes. My parents smoked, and yet here I am 7 years sober, let's say, and I'm smoking, which is, I could look back on like danger, danger. I was really promiscuous, right? My untreated addiction part of me sort of went into that area. And then I just started to think to myself, heroin's a bad idea. Like we all know that's a bad idea. And you were so young, right? I've grown up now. I've been sober all these years. I make good decisions. I'm very successful in my career. I'm in good shape. I make good decisions about what to eat. And so I think my brain just sort of got me into like, you can do it this time. I also started dating someone who was a drinker. And so very quickly, I just sort of jumped in. And in the beginning, it was not a big deal. I had been telling myself stories like, and I've been saying this sort of stuff like, if I go back out, I'll be on a street corner shooting heroin in 10 minutes. And I had a drink and nothing happened. So then I had another and no big deal. But over that period of drinking, it ended up getting really bad again. So I think that's kind of how I got back into it. My mind just told me, you can do it now. It's going to be okay. You're different. And I wasn't.
What was that second rock bottom like, or was it a rock bottom?
It was not a rock bottom in the same way at all. And that made it kind of hard. I had a moment that sort of made me wake up a little bit, but it was a moment an earlier me could have completely rationalized. And I knew by the time this had come around, I knew like I am not in control again. I am out of control the same way I was before. And I had a moment where I went out with a friend. I was starting to binge drink. I would go on 4 or 5 day binges where I was drinking around the clock. And I went out with a friend and we went to a bar and I was just hammered. And I was alternately passing out at the bar and then waking up and climbing onto the karaoke stage with people I didn't know who did not want me there. Anyway, go back to my friend's house, pass out. Next thing I know, it's like 10:30 the next morning. And I was the one who got my son up every day when he was with me to take him to school. And I'd missed it. Now, it wasn't a problem because my wife was there and she got him up. It was fine. It was no big deal. But I knew in my mind that I had not planned to pass out and wake up the next day at 10:30. In my mind, I was like, what if she wasn't there and he woke up and his dad's not there? What's going on? That sort of scared me. I was really sick also. I was drinking so heavily that I had that, like, you feel awful. And that was enough to prompt me to go back that day to a 12-step meeting. The thing that was challenging is that my brain could keep saying, oh, it's not that bad. You've got the best job you've ever had. And you're living in a really nice house and you got a really nice car. And all this stuff was fine. But again, for me, I had just enough awareness from my earlier recovery to see just how sick I was. And I kept asking myself, do I really need to let this go further? Do I really need to wait until I'm in a car accident drunk with my son in the car? Because I was drinking and taking him to soccer practice. Do I really need to let that happen? I know where this is going. Unquestionably, I know where this is going. Do I need to let it keep going down, or can I just step off on this floor? And I was able to do that. But again, it was harder for me the second time for a bunch of different reasons. But that was one of the big ones.
Eric, I want to expand a bit on the loss of control and the realization of that and acceptance. It's one of the
Yeah.
hardest hurdles we must overcome. And I think part of it is just the way we frame it in society. Like we're supposed to be able to control an addictive drug. We're trying to control an uncontrollable thing.
Yep.
How did you realize that? Like, I'm out of control. I need to stop. Is it a moment where you're looking at a sunset? Was it at 10:30 a.m. when you woke up and your
It
wife
was
took
a
your kid to school?
it was a gradual process. My experience and the experience of so many people I've talked to is that we are trying to control this beast for a long time. And how do I know I'm out of control? It's because I say, I'm not going to drink today and I get hammered, or I'm only going to have two and I get hammered. I keep setting a line and I keep crossing it. And that sort of tells me, oh, I'm not in control. And to me, that's the heart of this whole thing. Can I make decisions about what's good for me with this substance and stick to them? And I just couldn't do it. I so badly, though, did not want to go back to 12-step programs and become abstinent again that I joined a program called moderation management. Moderation management was a program that by somebody who was a former abstinent person who believed they could drink moderately and they were going to teach everybody to do it. This same person went on to kill someone in a drunk driving accident. So I'm not saying that there's nothing to the program, but I'm
I've
saying
heard about that story.
didn't work for her. But I was like the best moderation management student, meaning like I read all the stuff, I did all the exercises, and I tried to control my drinking. And what I discovered was sometimes I can't do it at all. Other times I can do it, but it's misery. I remember many nights standing. There was a corner in my kitchen. The sink was here. A cabinet was over there. It's like 11:30 at night. I'm already like 2 drinks over what I was supposed to have. There's no reason on earth for me to take another shot of whiskey. I'm going upstairs to climb into bed. There's no reason. And yet I would stand there just torn apart with that, like, I have to, I can't, I have to, I can't, I have to, I can't. And sometimes I would walk away and sometimes I would drink it. So I had learned through all of that, like, I can't do this. When I do control it, it's just miserable. It's such an effort. And when I don't control it, it just goes off the rails. So to me, that part had become relatively self-evident. And again, I think if people are listening to a podcast like this and they look at their own life, they're going to see like, oh, I've been making rules. I've been making plans. I've been trying to get this thing under control a lot of different ways. And generally, it hasn't worked. And I think the reason that people arrive at an abstinence solution is because they've realized that.
Eric, that was a salient theme that emerged instantly with this podcast. Episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's like, okay, wait, none of them have been able to moderate. Let's see what happens with the next 30. None of them. Then we got to episode 100. None of them. This is consecutive. And again, in the long run, sometimes moderation works for a week or two, a couple months. And we're at episode 594 right now. Eric, I think I'm hearing from you. It didn't work for you. Am I right on that?
No, it didn't work at all. And I mean, some people can moderate, but I think a lot of people who are trying really hard to moderate, there's a reason that you're having to try really hard at it. And there's a reason it's not working. And that usually is that you have a problem beyond that.
Yeah, and you said the word misery. When I tried to moderate and I was successful at it, it wasn't fun at all. And, there's a lot of snake oils sold out there. But occasionally on Instagram, I see like a sponsored ad about a moderation plan or a moderation management app or whatnot. And I always try to build people up online. I don't try to troll people. I've wanted to comment several times, be like, yo, this does not work. I have not, because that's also, it's something that pushes us into the waters of abstinence. Look, I wanted to moderate. Of course I did. But there was this extremely painful chapter of so many broken rules, some of them very comical, of genius ideas that I had that didn't work out, where you throw up your hands at the end and be like, shit, I guess I'm just going to be sober. And I had to go through that intense time to fully squelch and squash every idea that I could moderate. Was that the same for you?
100%. I'm so glad I did moderation management as a program because I tried really hard. Like I said, I was like the A+ student. I'm not in the fact that I could moderate, but in how hard I tried. And that's a real good reminder to me now is like, you have tried this really hard. And I'm pretty good. When I give something my full attention, I tend to succeed at it. I gave this my full attention and I couldn't do it. And so that tells me that in this area of my life, I don't function like I do in the other areas of my life. Can I make good decisions in my life about many things? I can. But it does not appear, based on a lot of evidence, that when it's alcohol or drugs, that I can make good decisions. It hijacks my decision-making system.
It's one of the intense conundrums of addiction, because every other problem I've had in my life, the more energy, effort, and time I put on it, boom, we got it. Lift more weights, run harder, work harder, wake up earlier. And with addiction, it backfires. You're actually more in it. You're thinking more about the problem. And what you need is more sunsets, more electric guitar, more friends, more community, and that stuff. And you eventually realize it through many painful stages. So Eric, after 2008, no heroin, no alcohol, what was that, your second recovery like?
It was different than the first recovery. The first recovery, I went into treatment and I had no job. I had burned my life to the ground, and all I did was focus on recovery. This time, I had a job, I had a child. I went to, say, a meeting a day, but I couldn't give my whole life to recovery. So it was different. It was a little bit harder, but also pretty soon, really cool things started happening. I had a career in the software business. I really liked it more or less. I'd done well in it, but I was also like, I want to do my own thing. So it wasn't too long after I quit drinking that I started a solar energy company, which, when it didn't work 5 years later and I decided to shut that down, gave birth to the podcast that I do. So immediately for me, when I stop and I get past that initial really rough period, it's like there's this whole new level of energy, creativity, meanness that comes out. I sort of show back up. And so that's what it's been like. It's been an amazing 18 years. Everything I have, and I know this is a cliche, but everything I have is a result of me choosing to get sober. It's a pretty clear correlation.
Yeah, there's a moment when we say, oh shit, can't moderate, and we think our life is done. But the
Yep.
beauty of that paradox is that's your life has just begun. And so many cultures have worshiped and symbolized the snake as a symbol of change. And it's like the ultimate shedding of a skin that needs to go. Just
Yeah.
wasn't working. You think it's over, you think it's done. But like you just said, cool things started to happen.
The thing I often think about that is like, I gave up one thing and I got everything else in life. One thing I don't do, I get access to everything else. But when I do that one thing, it becomes the only thing. And I lose all the rest of my life. It's a pretty easy trade when I put it in those terms, right?
Eric, you've probably heard of Steve-O from Jackass.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, I've covered a couple of his lines, and I had one probably 10 weeks ago where he says he's so thankful that he didn't kind of struggle with alcoholism, that he wasn't
Yeah.
like, man, do I need to do this sober stuff? Do I need to keep in contact with my sober community? Do I need to keep meditating?
Yeah.
For me, I'm so thankful that it is black and white. It's one choice goes to death and one's to life. Are you thankful, or how do you view that of like, I can't go back?
100%. First time I burnt my life to the ground. And the second time, my drinking is still extreme. And so that's really clear to me. And I'm glad. I know a lot of people that got sober years and years and years ago, then went back out. They're drinking, they're smoking pot. They constantly talk about not doing it, but it's also never bad enough that it drives them to do it, to get clean. So they live in this shadowland middle ground. They're missing so much of their life. So I am really grateful that for me, it's extreme.
Yeah, part of his quote was the same thing. He knows a lot of people that are just pissing their lives away in the middle
Yeah.
ground, without a
Yeah.
doubt. So, in almost 18 years of sobriety, recovery, gosh, I know people who might be a month away from alcohol or on day one. They're like, what the hell is that like? Tell us more, Eric.
It's life. Life is life. Life has its challenges. It has its beauties. It has its challenges. I have all those same things. There are a couple ways that's very different, though. One is I don't think about drinking or drugs at all. I tell a story in my book of me going to the pharmacy, picking up my mom's prescriptions, bringing them to her house, not really thinking much about it. And after doing that for about a month, I realized I was picking up opiates. I was picking up oxycodone. I would have robbed you at gunpoint for that. And now
Wow.
I'm taking it to my mom and I didn't even think about it. It wasn't like I'm taking it to her, but boy, it's really hard. It was just a non issue. And that to me is the biggest gift. And it's the most unimaginable one. When we are sitting in that obsession, it seems unimaginable that it could just disappear. We think, well, maybe I could get sober, but it's going to be really hard. And yes, it is for a little while, but most people get what I got, and that's the greatest gift. It's gone. As long as I sort of maintain my recovery, I go out all the time. I'm around alcohol all the time. I just don't even think about it. So that's one beauty. And I think the other is that recovery for me meant I had to learn to understand how my mind worked, how my emotions worked, and how to work with those more skillfully. So the challenges that come up in life, same as everybody's, I think I deal with them better than your average bear because I have a lot of tools at my disposal. I have a lot of work on myself and my thought patterns and my emotions that allows me to have more serenity in the midst of all of life's challenges. And I think that's also a really big gift.
Eric, you said, I need to know how my mind works, how I work. And the word that showed up in my consciousness was self-aware.
Yeah.
And there's a line in the book that sold the most copies of all time. You point out the splinter in somebody else's eye, but you're unaware of the plank in your own eye. It's Jesus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so becoming self-aware, but building this awareness is so paramount in life. And so many quantum physicists and theorists talk about the power of awareness, like Einstein and David Bohm talked about awareness in quantum science can change the activity of molecules and atoms at the molecular level. So this awareness, when we turn our gaze inward, both on the mystic level, both on the scientific level, has been shown to be so powerful to transform the self. And then others around you also get the benefits of your recovery. Eric, I want to shift gears for just a second here. So doing the One You Feed podcast, you've been doing that for over a decade, right? Like 12, 15 years?
12 years. Yep.
12
Amazing.
years. Okay. And I know it's not specific to alcohol addiction podcast. I know that. And thank you for having me on the podcast 3 years ago. You're extremely talented and it's a real enjoyable interview. What are you seeing out there is causing the most distress in the human life? Because overdosing on opiates or drinking ourselves to death or even shooting ourselves is not a common human trait. Nowhere in our line of genetic code says, I think I'm just going to eat myself to death. It doesn't happen normally. And in many cultures, it's absurd to hear that. Quick anecdote. I'm reading a book about a Christian missionary who went to the Amazon to try to convert them. And he was telling them a story about somebody in his family committed suicide and they all started laughing, which was totally insensitive, but they couldn't understand the fact that somebody would kill themselves. It was just so far, like that's not what you do in their culture. And they just couldn't even accept a culture that accepted Jesus, but the people in that culture kill themselves. It didn't line up. Okay, back to my question. What are you seeing is causing the biggest source of discomfort?
I mean, our modern world, I think the way it's designed is just not good for our mental health. I don't want to go on a huge commentary about the ails of the world because that's not the way I see the world. But the author Johann Hari has written a number of great books. One's called Chasing the Scream, which is about like US drug policy and what it caused. But another one was called Lost Connections. And his theory was that depression occurs primarily due to loss of connection. And other people have then gone on to say that addiction occurs as a loss of connection. So what do they mean by connection, or what do I mean by it? It means being connected to ourselves. It can mean being connected to others. It can mean being connected to spirituality or nature or my guitar. But those connections, I think, are what help us be fully human. And so I think that's the big thing. Our modern life doesn't encourage connection, right? I live this, right? And I have to fight against it. I wake up in the morning, I get on my phone. I'm on my phone. Am I connecting with people? Kind of, maybe. And then I can work all day, kind of by myself. Maybe I see someone like you on a screen, but I work all day by myself. I have dinner with my partner, and then I can sit down and we can watch Netflix for a few hours and I go to bed. Nothing wrong with that as a thing, but that all of the time really robs me of the connections to all the other things. And the world has become so easy to just escape from. Phones, screens of all sorts, drugs, alcohol, eating. I mean, all of it is just so available and easy, right? You can get alcohol delivered to your house. You can get weed delivered to your house. You can get food delivered to your house. I used to work with clients and be like, well, if you don't want to eat poorly, just don't have any bad food in the house. Well, DoorDash has kind of ruined that. I mean, those are just some of the things. I think we're more kind of alone and in our own heads.
Eric, after doing the Recovery Elevator podcast for 10 years, I have arrived at the same conclusion. And the one word for that is disconnection. We've never been a more disconnected species, and that is causing intense emotional distress, which then causes physical pain. The modern medicine machine has disconnected the mind and body, but our thoughts absolutely affect our physical health and well-being. But how you answer that question to start is also how I want to live. Life is what it is. I do not want to live in an echo chamber of myself saying that, oh my God, what we called normal is horrible. The world is horrible. And maybe it's always been that way, but no, it has not always been that way in terms of how disconnected we are right
Yeah.
now.
And it's the world
Keep
we
going.
have, right? It can be useful to diagnose some of the causes, but like you say, to put myself in opposition to it all the time, that's not useful. The world is as it is. How am I going to respond to that? And the world has always been challenging in a variety of different ways. It just depends where you are and what you're going through. Maybe you're more connected, but you don't have a steady source of food. Well, that's not great. So life is challenging. Our job is always to just what's the wisest response to that?
So, on the flip side of this, Eric, how are you building your life? In a disconnected world, how can people address this? What's the antidote to this?
Well, I'm fortunate. I get to talk to two people a week that are really interesting. People like you. You'll be my third this week, my fourth. And I do get sustenance from that because they're real and meaningful conversations. I prefer that you and I were sitting in the same room, but this is still connection. So I'm fortunate in that way. But I think a lot of us can be fortunate in that way if we choose to see the interactions that are happening at work as opportunities for connection. Even if I'm on Zoom and you're on Zoom, but we work together, we see each other regularly, there's a way to make that a connecting thing. And when people look at connection, like I said, there's lots of different types. For me, the biggest one is I have to force myself to go out regularly. And I regularly make sure I schedule time with friends. I have rules around this. Like 2 nights a week, I have to leave the house and go do something. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but I'm 55. You slow down a little bit when you get to be my age. A lot of people, it's very easy just to be at home. So I make myself go out 2 nights a week and do something. And ideally, someone is with me when I do that. I try and take one walk a week with a friend. There's a group of people throughout my life that are former coaching clients or listeners of the show, people I've gotten to know a little bit over the years, and I'm in contact with those people. And I do some coaching work. So that gives me an opportunity. So I think there's a variety of ways that I get connection.
Yeah, I have one conversation, average a week, about intense, authentic subject matter. It's this, the RE
Yep.
podcast. And I've had rough days where I'm like, oh my God, in 2 hours I have an interview. I don't think I can do this. And then you get on the interview and it concludes and like, wow, what was the problem before? It helps me so much.
I agree. I have the same thing. I think what anything that you have to do, there's sometimes resistance to. You're like, I don't want to do it. But I mean, almost every time, once we turn on record and we go, I'm in my happy place. I'm just in a place that is authentic, real. I am completely focused. I'm not thinking about anything else. So we're fortunate that we get to do this for our career. But I think it's mostly it just comes down to intentional decisions about what matters to us the most. In my book, there's a lot about this, about like what matters most and how do we do more of it. We just have to be intentional.
Eric, tell us more about this book. Where can we find it? Just give us a little snippet
Yeah.
about what it contains, but tell us more.
Yeah, it's called How a Little Becomes a Lot, The Art of Small Changes for a More Meaningful Life. And it's really a book about two types of change. It's about how do we make the changes that we want to make in our lives? How do we exercise more? How do we eat better? How do we finish a novel? How do we start a business? About the general principles of that. And then it's also a book about dealing with the sort of change that life just sometimes imposes on us. And how do we work with that more skillfully? It's available certainly on Amazon. It's in a lot of Barnes and Nobles. I still am getting photos from people of it in Barnes and Noble. It may be in your local independent bookstore. So those are the main places.
Yeah, I love the title. Change is hard. Eric, before we hit the rapid fire round, give us some advice on how to make change in general, because change for humans is so hard.
I mean, I think one of the biggest things, and it's a premise that underlies the whole book, is that change is a skill we can learn. It's not a character flaw. And drinking is a great example of this, right? We think we're broken. We think we're terrible. We think we're awful. We think there's something wrong with us. But my experience and the experience of most anybody who's gotten sober would probably say the same thing, was that like what I needed to learn was a new set of skills. And so making that shift in our mind is really valuable because it turns down the shame and it gets us into learning mode. And my experience with my recovery was it was learning, learning, learning. And then at one point, I got enough learning, I got enough of the puzzle pieces to fit together that I was abstinent. So that's the way I view all of this, as a sort of a puzzle, and puzzles have solutions. So that flip is really important. It's one of the core elements of the beginning, the baseline of all change.
I love that. That change is a skill that can be improved. It can be sharpened. It can be strengthened. I love it. Well, Eric, we have hit the rapid fire round. If you could answer these questions 5 to 10 seconds, that'd be great. Are you ready?
I think so.
What's the one thing you've learned about yourself in this whole journey?
I have resources inside of me that I did not know I had.
What's been your best sober moment in life?
Oh boy, I'm going to just pick one. I did a book event in Boulder recently for my book. My mother was able to come, and it was a really beautiful moment. And she happened to pass 2 weeks later. So the moment has a very special thing to me.
Wow.
There's so many of them, though. I could list 1,000 beautiful moments.
All right, it's a hot summer day. You sit down on the couch. What are you drinking?
Water mainly, or water with a little bit of flavored herbal tea mixed in. If it's a drinking event, like if I'm going to a drinking event, I'm drinking ginger beer.
What's the point of life?
I think it's to be here for it, to experience it.
What's the best musical act out of the 80s?
The Replacements.
And what are some of your favorite resources that you still use today?
A big resource for me is always music. It always has been, it always will be. We talked about friends. Friendship is a big resource to me. And I have a spiritual life, and nurturing that and reading about that. For me, I happen to be a Zen practitioner, so reading Zen books and talking to Zen people is a big resource in what keeps me centered and healthy.
All right, what parting piece of guidance can you give to listeners?
I end the book with this, and many people may have heard it, which is keep coming back. They say it in 12-step meetings, keep coming back. I don't mean keep coming back to 12-step meetings. I mean keep coming back to yourself. Keep coming back to your ability to get sober. Keep doing that. And as a puzzle, if we keep at it, we will solve it.
And I got to throw in one more question before we hear you. You might need to ditch the booze if line. And that karaoke line earlier was great. You might need to ditch the booze if you get on karaoke stage with other people and they don't want you there. All right. You just mentioned you're a Zen practitioner. Where's spirituality? Where's higher power? And has that increased over the last 18 years? What does that look like for you?
I see it differently, right? I don't think there's a conscious being out there that is orchestrating things and intervenes in our life. That's not my spirituality, and Zen isn't really that. It's more that there's this unbroken, unified reality that everything is fine exactly as it is. Now, there's another side of that, which is the world we live in, which things aren't fine. But having access to that other view really is healing for me.
Yeah, every snowflake falls in its place. Yeah, thank you, Eric. And before we depart, let's hear your own You Might Need to Ditch the Booze If line.
You might need to ditch booze if you are scheduled to be the minister at a friend's wedding and you show up hammered and in a pregnant nun costume.
Sorry, I'm trying not to laugh.
Oh, it's true, and it's insane.
Did you get the job done, or did they have to pull in a replacement?
I did get the job done. We were able to sort of settle things down. You know, I had a little while before I had to actually officiate, and I pulled myself together, and I think they thought it was beautiful, but it scared the pants off of their parents. You know, like, who have you asked to officiate your wedding? This guy's insane.
You're like, well, he's probably 32, 34, maybe this size chest. How's this with the shirt and tie? Think this is going to work for you, Eric?
Exactly.
Oh, amazing. Eric, hey, so good connecting with you, man. A great job with the One You Feed podcast and the release of your latest book. Keep up the good work, man, and I hope we get to keep in touch.
Yeah, 100%, Paul. Same for you.
I heard a great line on a chat recently I wanted to share with you guys. And that was, it's more efficient to know yourself than to fix yourself. So change is hard. You can probably agree with that. And if you try to change or fix everything in your life that you don't like, well, that's going to be a tall order. On the flip side, awareness, or being aware of yourself, is actually way more than half the battle. And with awareness comes the shift on its own. The change happens on its own. So think of your drinking. Once you became aware that this was something that you could not control in the long run, you could not moderate, you couldn't put the plug back in the jug. Once that awareness arrived with no strings attached, no more ideas of moderating, well, that was the beginning of the end of your drinking. Another truth I read was that recovery didn't open the gates of heaven and let me in. It opened up the gates of hell and let me out. So I want to thank our production team for today's episode. We have our editor, Natasha. We got Robin on the show notes and Chris on the decks. Let's hear it on the ones, on the twos.
How about a little wiki?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And I also want to thank our sponsors for keeping the show going. Recovery Elevator, it all starts from the inside out. I love you guys.
I see you, Savior, I see you, Savior, Almighty Savior, I see you, Savior, I see you, Savior, I see you, Savior, Almighty Savior, I see you, Savior.